Back in the day, Chinese children get a second name when formal education began. When my mother left behind everything she had ever known to join a movement in bringing forth a new world, she gave herself a third name. She called herself Eternal Light. She grew up rich in the last phase of the Chinese feudal system. Each child in her family had his or her own quarters equipped with a personal slave. This photo was taken in 1904. The girls were kidnapped for the slave trade. It was a tradition for rich families to buy a slave of the same sex and similar age for each of the children when they were very young. The duty of this personal slave was to serve the child 24/7 for life. When a female child grew up and married, her personal slave would go to the new home with her. When my mother married, she set her slave free. The preparation of my mother's marriage started when my mother was around 3. She was one of 3 daughters. All 3 were arranged to be married into well-to-do families. One of her sisters was arranged to be married into a merchant family and the other into a farming family. They were of the lower classes in the traditional Chinese class system. My mother was arranged to be married into a scholar family. The higher class of scholars required the refinement of feet binding. The idea was to have the feet be shaped like a triangle no longer than 3 inches long. So the process must begin at an early age and continue for the rest of the woman's life. Her nightly painful cries were not answered by her mother, who was in her own bed in her own quarters. Her only companion was her personal slave, who was herself a child, torn from her parents and sold. In this photograph, the barefoot girl was slave to the child with the bound feet. My grandmother rarely left her bed. Her feet were bound and rendered her practically a cripple. Her bed was a big, traditional Chinese bed. She taught my mother how to wrap dumplings on her bed. The servants would bring all the necessary components. When the wrappings were done, the servants would take everything away. My mother knew nothing of what made those dumplings edible once they were wrapped. She had never been to the kitchen in her huge family compound. She didn't even know where the kitchen was. My grandfather spoke English and worked as a translator. No one of his wealth and ancestry worked for an income. But he was different and considered himself a modern man. About a year into the process, he decided to end the barbaric feet binding. Much of the damage had already been done. 8 of her 10 toes were broken and her psyche scarred. She had spent nearly 2 years of her early childhood in bed as an invalid. Walking was a painful reminder of the process for the rest of her life. The rest of her life was not lived as a princess, where she could stay in bed and be served by slaves.